Welcome to today's demonstration. We're going to be looking at the ESET Endpoint Encryption Management Console powered by Deslock, and we're going to see how to deploy the ESET Endpoint Encryption software in order to full disk encrypt two workstations with single sign-on and automatically activating the users. We shall also take a look at how we can recover the users if they have been denied access at the full disk encryption pre-boot login screen. We have an already installed version of the management console and two other virtual machines. Bob's PC, which has a Windows 7 operating system with a legacy BIOS, and Alice's PC, which has a Windows 10 operating system with UEFI firmware. All three of the machines belong to the domain deslock.com. Firstly, the only prerequisite we need in order to start managing the encryption on our endpoints is to add our client licenses. Here we already have our Pro licenses added to the console, and we've also got some standard, however, we won't be looking at that today. Next, we need to add users. For those of you utilizing Active Directory, we can enable a sync in order to bulk add the users into the management console. All we need to do is select Active Directory, go into the settings, enable the synchronization, and enter the AD pathway and credentials if necessary. Following that, we are going to enable self-enrollment, which is the automatic activation feature, by linking your Pro license to the AD sync process. There are various synchronization modes. I'm just going to be using the manual import, but we do also have the basic automatic import methods in order to bulk add all of your users from Active Directory, and if you add any subsequent users, the enterprise server will search your Active Directory every 60 minutes as a default and add the users into your console. And I'm now just adding Alice and Bob to the root of our users panel. Now we need to deploy the software with a workstation policy. Firstly, I will disable the activation dialog or the activation user interface. There'll be no need to see this dialog as we are not activating using a generated activation code, which we would use for off-network activation. We then need to allow the self-enrollment process and enable auto full disk encryption. And enable auto full disk encryption with the single sign-on process. If you wish to, you can enable username caching. This feature at the pre-boot login screen will automatically provide the username of the last logged in user, which will reduce the amount of details having to be entered. We can also provide some help text for users who have been denied access at the full disk encryption pre-boot login screen. I have already created a team underneath the root of the workstations policy, which will have inherited the policy from the default. And I have already configured the relevant policies for this particular demonstration. I'm just going to add some help text. Once we have our workstation policy in place, we can go to our client software development window, and we can scan the network for our machines that we are about to push to. I'm going to select Alice's and Bob's workstations and carry out the remote install process. All we need is the local administrator details. Then we can decide after install what we wish the endpoint to do once the install has actually been received. The workstations will then go through a reboot process in order to clear Windows caches and carry out the safe start process in order to ensure the integrity of the boot process. As you can see here on our Windows 10 machine, which has the UEFI firmware, there is a very new GUI. The user will then log into their Windows domain account where Deslock will finish its install process. The full disk encryption process will begin. And as we have enabled single sign-on, the user will just have to confirm their network password. As you can also see here, it gives us the username credential that has been generated that the user will enter at the pre-boot FTE login. The self-enrollment process will then finish and the user will then automatically be activated. And just to show you the same operation on a Windows 10 machine, both users are now activated on both machines, and the full disk encryption process carries on in the background. The user can indeed have a look to see where the status of their full disk encryption is and minimize that screen if they want to. The administrator can come back to the enterprise server to monitor the progress of the workstations that they've activated and initiated full disk encryption on.